Scissors are right here. Most of the scissors have gone into hiding this week with all the cutting there is to do. I've lost my voice because I've been rambling about furniture from the past a little bit too much, but welcome to the channel, which is still about furniture from the past and sharing the most compelling examples of it that I find with you. Now here we have a very remarkable pair of chairs from the 1820s, probably right from about the year 1820, and these were made, as you are about to see, by a master furniture maker named Jean-Jacques Werner, furniture maker to the king at the time, here in the 1820s. And we're going to see chairs like this, furniture of this quality and variety, conserved in the northwest wing of the Louvre, the Paris Museum of Decorative Art. So just take a look at that blonde wood, that burled ash, and prepare to see in the flesh, right now, a similar pair by the same maker, provided that they're still inside of these packages. That would really be a shame if they got somehow switched. Wow, that's remarkable. I gotta say, part of why I wanted to do this with you is just to sort of give you the experience that I selfishly have all to myself every time I get a shipment and I end up getting to open some of the most remarkable presents. Nothing short of superb, and they're really emblematic of very fine furniture at the end of the Napoleonic Empire, moving into the Charles X period right around 1820. Okay, so the most remarkable thing about these chairs that allow us to truly attribute them to Jean-Jacques Werner, it's these armrests, these scrolls here that terminate on top of a lion's claw. That's a very special thing that we're not going to see probably ever again, in all honesty. I'd be very surprised if I see this again in my life on another chair. Anyway, whatever. Now the green leather isn't original, but it's done by the Verner brothers, a small Parisian firm which has hundreds of those original period iron rollers that generate these wonderful gold embossed borders. So the chairs are out, and of course we're going to take a closer look at them. We're going to see some of the hidden parts, and we're going to discuss this master furniture maker, Jean-Jacques Werner. But first, let's just abstractly outline what we have here with these pieces of what is referred to as Restoration period furniture, for the aesthetic movement that corresponds to the restoration of the Bourbon Monarchy in post-Napoleonic France. Now, Restoration furniture is not the most famous French style, but it's one that resonates with Americans because it is furniture from this time and of this period that was ordered for the White House in 1817. Perhaps there's no better anecdote than that to attest to the universality of Parisian furniture in the Restoration style, even if this style is not what first comes to mind when we think of the French decorative arts. Now, for enthusiasts of furniture from the past, for this special period furniture, which really predates most antiques, and which was an intimate, handmade moment in the history of art, we're going to appreciate the precision of the execution on high-quality restoration pieces, regardless of what we think of the style. And this is natural because here in the 1820s, we are at the chronological and technical summit of a centuries-long tradition in handcrafted art furniture, such that tools and techniques have advanced to a point here where they're able to produce furniture, art furniture such as this, with a level of refinement that had not been previously possible. So many of you know more than I do, and I can at least endeavor to show these types of pieces to you when I find them. But for any of you that are new to the subject of collecting furniture from the past, that traditional timeline of when furniture was most artistically produced spans from the Renaissance, the 1500s, up to the year 1840, that moment of industrialization in world or European history, just a few decades after these chairs were made. Now, when we look at this relatively long-lived restoration style that sort of vaguely stretches from about 1815 to 1830, the early 1830s, we're going to notice that it has multiple facets. And one of the more memorable and unique ones is this earlier facet, which was known for the use of these interesting blonde woods, in this case, burled ash. Now, the use of these blonde indigenous French woods, of course, was occurring earlier back in the 18th century and during the previous Napoleonic period, especially after 1806, when Napoleon had imposed a continental embargo which restricted access to the mahogany that was otherwise arriving from the Caribbean. But when we think of the more purposeful and increased use of these blonde woods, we're really thinking of the 1820s here, when the artistic minds of the day, Jean-Jacques Werner being one of them, and then one of his clients, the Duchesse de Berry, when these people were really seeking a new style which would be a decided turn of the page away from the Napoleonic Empire. In fact, much of the comparable furniture that we glanced at in the museum was actually commissioned from Verner by the Duchesse de Berry. And her life's a very interesting story for another time, but she tried to come to power, she sparked a small revolt, and then she had to hide behind a fireplace in a house before getting smoked out. But anyway, in continuation of this brief overview here, Restoration furniture is considered, and it is, a neoclassical style, meaning that these chairs were then a new interpretation of ancient classical art. So in terms of the polarity in art history, classicism is a more orderly, linear style that derives a lot of its decor and design from the ancient republics. And then on the other side of things, we have anti-classical styles, which are curvilinear, asymmetrical, organic, and movement-driven. And now that isn't to say that these neoclassical pieces of furniture are devoid of movement. They're clearly not devoid of curves, but we can see here that we're dealing with something that is quite stately, symmetrical, and then we see here with the claw feet that we're dealing with some of the ancient classical decorative repertoire when claws were intended to imbue the user of the furniture with the power of the animal. We're also going to see these little flowers here that sort of evoke the classical tropics. We have the saber feet, these sort of masculine empire-style backs as we're here in the very early Restoration. So we see that these are neoclassical chairs that retain a certain Napoleonic rigidity, a certain Napoleonic masculinity, but what happens in the Restoration style here semantically is that we have the collision of the elegance of the old regime seen here in these graceful curves that are added to an otherwise sort of monolithic empire chair design. And with this interestingly early Restoration pair of chairs, we see that we haven't quite reached the hyper-refined inlay work that later fully Charles X pieces are famous for. Here, though, much of the decor is, as we can see, lent to these pieces by the contrast of this burled indigenous ash and these darker moldings here. And that also allows for the unique grain pattern here of the wood to be more the star of the show. And of course, we can also note that simply the design, the masterful lines of these chairs are as well part of the decor. As to the maker, Jean-Jacques Werner lived from 1791 to 1849, and he was one of the top names of the period. And just as we think of these blond woods as a key part of Restoration furniture, Jean-Jacques Werner was the prime name behind the trend for their use. In fact, he even cultivated his own trees, he planned them out 10 years ahead of time, and he was a specialist in this burled ash, which he even sold to his contemporaries. Now, much of this information on him is readily available, as he's one of the grand names in furniture history, but I owe a lot of what I'm about to recite to sort of the Bible of early 19th century furniture by Denise Ledouxlabarde, who features a rather large and hefty entry about Jean-Jacques Werner back in the W section of the book. Now, thanks to the research that's made so readily available in this dictionary, we know that in 1819, Jean-Jacques Werner was established at 126 Rue de Grenelle in Paris, where he devoted himself to making art furniture, primarily in this blond wood. And now, stylistically, interestingly, these chairs date to right about the year 1819, we could logically say. So we have an example of early Werner here. That same year, in 1819, he won a silver medal at the Exposition des Produits de l'Industrie Française, which was, well, the exposition of products of French industry. It was a precursor to the world's fairs. And one of the pieces exhibited at that show, a commode secrétaire, was later accepted by King Charles X to promote the use of indigenous French woods, and it is now on display in the Grand Trianon National Museum at Versailles. And so the jury at this 1819 exhibition was so intrigued by his successful use of these novel woods that they wondered whether or not he could employ indigenous French marbles as well. So at the 1823 exhibition, the next one, he also earned or was awarded the silver medal, and many of his pieces featured indigenous French marbles, such as the bleu turquin. Now, later into the 1820s, he struggled to receive the royal commissions in France that he wanted, although the King of Bavaria was singing his praises. And in fact, at the 1827 exhibition, he did not receive the gold medal, which he believed he deserved, but the controversy was that he employed so many workers at his famous workshop that many of the pieces were not really of his hand, so therefore he shouldn't have the gold medal. Naturally, part of why many of the pieces weren't entirely made by him is because he was so successful that he had to supervise and lead a whole team of master furniture makers to execute his designs alongside him. But nevertheless, he was quite discouraged, and he even considered moving out of France to work for a foreign court where his works, he thought, would be more appreciated, and where he was even, according to Denise Ledoux-Labalde's research, awarded a very generous salary. But by 1827, he had developed a very private and privileged clientele in France, and it was that year that the Duchesse de Berry wrote him a letter regarding the pieces that she owned that were delivered to her in 1819, almost 10 years earlier, which we already saw in the museum, and she wrote that since delivery day, she was enchanted by them, and that the wood and the marbles have retained their tones, beauty and luster, and far from deteriorating, they gained in color. And so, now Jean-Jacques Werner has gone down as one of the top names of the Restoration period, and he's published in many relevant texts, and his works are on display at Versailles, the Palais Lichtenberg in Munich, and the Paris Museum of Decorative Art. So now, if we look beneath the chairs, we're going to see the typical inner belt of an early 19th century piece. We're going to see this burlap webbing, see that it was artisanally upholstered. We're also going to notice these little reinforcements that were clearly added at a later date. But then we're going to see here along the face of this belt, we're going to see some tacks that are disintegrating in the wood from a previous upholstery job. We're also going to see a layer of glue that is obstructing the area where we might otherwise find a stamp by Jean-Jacques Werner. Perhaps I should get to wetting a cloth, trying to remove this very carefully to see if there isn't a stamp. But the published piece, which does feature inlay, but it shares such a likeness to these with regard to these probably unique to Werner's production armrests, I'd say that we have a very convincing attribution to Jean-Jacques Werner. And furthermore, we see the burled ash here, which he spent his life cultivating, perfecting, and using. Well, with what lies beneath taken care of, why don't we just pan over the backs of these chairs here so that we can see that they are also veneered in this wonderful burled ash wood. They are also decorative. We're going to see as well the presence of this second frame, sometimes referred to as a baguette here, which sort of lines the overall frame of the back of the chair. And the presence of this construction technique is just associated with authentic early 19th century manufacture, sometimes on, let's say, less unusual models of chairs which would have been more readily copied. We'll notice when they're made in the early 20th century that they will not have this second frame on the back. But the other interesting part, more abstractly, of looking at the backs is just to notice how a chair is really a work of art in the art of furniture, more so than most pieces, because it, unlike most pieces, needs to be complete from all sides. The design of course, a usual case piece is blank on the back, but here the furniture maker had to create something which is light enough to move, sturdy enough to sit on, and then pleasing to look at from all angles. And so, with all of that being said, I really do hope that you've enjoyed taking a closer look at these interesting and unique traces of the early Restoration period, circa 1820, preserving them online here with me. These traces of what are most convincingly from the hand of Jean-Jacques Werner. And so, like usual, if you've liked the videos, if you've enjoyed this one, please subscribe to the channel, as it would greatly help in the endeavor of creating an online period furniture library of the most compelling pieces that I encounter. Thank you. Notice how we snip while being very mindful of the period furniture inside of the package.